A couple of months ago, one of the executives over at Ubisoft said AAA games are getting so expensive to produce that they have to sell around 10 million copies in order to just break even. Now, obviously, he can't speak on behalf of other studios, but he is saying that this is essentially a problem within the industry as a whole and not just an Ubisoft problem, because I think everyone can tell that games are just getting more expensive to produce than they have been in the past. And it gets even worse when you consider this other fact that he says in this article, that in a given year, there's probably around 10 games or so that actually sell 10 million copies. And that's not even just the dozens of AAA games, but it's also the hundreds of independent games that are released in a given year. So when you factor all this in, it just goes to show that the industry is kind of operating in an unsustainable manner. But that's not just bad news for these AAA developers. According to BioShock creator Ken Levine, it's bad news for the gamers as well, because it's creating stagnation in what new games are being created. BioShock and BioShock Infinite director Ken Levine says games getting bigger has led to creative stagnation. You stop taking risks and people just tune it out. In the opinion of BioShock franchise creator Ken Levine, the video game studio's continued obsession with making their works bigger and bigger has resulted in an industry-wide death of creativity, particularly as expansive budgets have led to the prioritization of trend chasing over innovation. And there's a problem when you say that AAA games are trying to chase trends, because with their expansive budgets, it takes around, 4 or 5 years for a game to actually get developed. I'm talking like if I wanted to make a game right now, a AAA game, if it was greenlit right now, it'd take 4 or 5 years in order for the game to be out. But when you're just trying to chase trends, well, trends are ever changing. So that's why you'll get a lot of games that'll come out now and you play and you'll be like, oh, this feels like something that was made 4 or 5 years ago, or something that would have been relevant then. And that's because that's what it was like when it was being greenlit. So trying to chase trends really doesn't work, but by trying to also play it safe and not willing to take any risk, that's kind of what they're doing. They're basically just following behind on everything else because it just doesn't work. So basically, a lot of this opinion from Ken Levine is coming from an interview that he did back in December and it's being reported on from Bounding Into Comics right here. And these are some of the points that he was saying that the AAA gaming industry needs to do in order to kind of get out of this creative funk that they found themselves in. Just creating a door now versus creating a door 10 years ago just takes a lot more time, because you have normal maps and traders and higher polygons and physics and all this other stuff to contend with. He explained everything's getting more expansive, especially in the big AAA space, because they're spending the most money. And when you're spending all this money, naturally you have people concerned about the commercial viability of it. And yes, that makes sense. When you're spending so much money on a game, you have to have mass appeal. And when you want mass appeal, that means you're going to have to not risk doing something that could potentially alienate people. So you're going to have to just play it safe. And while the final result might be something that a lot of people really like, generally you don't get something that people just absolutely love. For that, you kind of need to be a little bit more niche with it, and you have to risk people absolutely hating it, because if you're going to have some people love something, then naturally you're going to have some people hate it. But I think they're going for everyone just liking it. And while that might be fine for them as a business standpoint, it's not really good as a consumer. And eventually gamers just kind of get tired of that and they want something new. And if they're not going to give it to them, then they're just going to, like you said, just kind of tune it out. But the problem with AAA is if you don't innovate, especially in games, you start losing people because they've seen it before. And so we have potentially an over-reliance in some cases on franchises. And we have seen with franchises and AAA games that kind of on the decline. He compares this to Marvel movies because they've kind of been on the decline in recent years. And that's because people have just gotten tired of it and they want something new, or at least they're not happy with what's been going on now. And that's kind of been a normal thing within the movie industry, where you have these trends that just kind of come and go. But when it comes to AAA games, since a game costs many times more to produce and takes longer to produce than a movie, well, then a lot of these studios are less willing to take the risks that even Hollywood studios would be willing to take on some of their bigger movies. And that's obviously a problem for this sort of situation. Far from just random ranting, Levine's observations are supported by the many multi-million dollar budget flops that have released in recent years. For instance, Warner Brothers' Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League reportedly lost the company over $200 million, while Sony's live service shooter Concord was shut down mere weeks after its launch. Against a $400 million budget, BioWare's troubled development of Dragon Age The Veilguard and its damage control review marketing strategy and the failure of Star Wars Outlaws add to the over-expanding list of examples where ambition failed to meet market expectations. And you also have to think these games cost so much to produce, and if you look at them, they don't look like they're as expensive as they are, because with how much they spent on these, you think these would have been phenomenal games, but that's a problem with a lot of the hardware and technology that's becoming more expensive. So these studios are left trying to cut costs wherever they can. And one of the ways that they've been doing that has been with the talent and the people working on it. So instead of hiring the best people for the job that are more expensive, they're hiring new people to work on these games. And that's why you'll get issues with it, like a lot of glitches, bad modeling, poor writing, all this other stuff, because they're entry-level people doing these things that actually takes an artist's hands in order to do it. Ubisoft has actually said when it comes to their upcoming game, Assassin's Creed Shadows, over half the people working on it, this is the first time they're working on a AAA game. So it just goes to show not only are these games getting more expensive, but they're not necessarily putting the money in the best place. Personally, I think it would be better suited to spend more money on talented people creating something and have, I don't know, a lesser quality graphics or less fancy visuals versus spending more money to make it look pretty, but you have not as good people working on it. But that's just my personal opinion, because even though graphics and stuff have been impressive in recent years, I personally don't care about a lot of the technology behind it. I just want fun games. That's why you can go back and play a bunch of retro games and things like that, because they're just fun games. They're just built off of gameplay and the design of it. They didn't need all the fancy visuals in order to try to draw people in, but it seems to be that's what AAA games have been prioritizing in recent years. And I don't think it has been working out for them, but we can see that with a lot of the failures that they listed here. But one of the other problems with this, them trying to play it safe, is not only are they going to play it safe, but there's also been talk about some studios want to actually charge $100 for a game. So they're not making as much money on each individual game. So they're trying to just charge more for it. And hopefully that can make up the losses right there. GTA 6 is kind of the canary in the coal mine, because some people said it's going to sell so well that they can charge $100 and people will pay. And while that might be true for that game, it's not going to be the case for all AAA games. So if they did this, that just means less people will be buying games. So that would further exacerbate the decline. But there is still some hope, because indie devs are willing to actually take some risks when it comes to games, because they're not spending as much on them. And it's just people with a passion trying to do something. And if something in the indie world catches on, then we'll see more people within the AAA game and more developers within that sphere start adopting it. A good example of that, I would say, is Minecraft. That was just an indie game that came out, but after that happened, well, then suddenly all these AAA games have crafting elements to it. So you can see pieces like that seep into it, but it has to start within the indie sphere. So I think if you want AAA games to improve themselves, you can't expect them to be the trendsetters in that too, because even like the article said, that they're basically just trend chasers. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Do you agree with Ken Levine in that there's a stagnation within this industry, or do you think things are fine and he's just kind of being a little over dramatic with it? And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share this video out there, because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.